Hey guys, Ryan from the Mavericks. This is podcast episode 16, and today we're talking about duty. So, in reference to duty, I want to share with you two stories. A few nights ago, I was putting my son to sleep, and I was sitting with him in the rocking chair. My son's 2.5 years old, and he said, "Daddy, don't go to work." And it was nighttime, right? So I'm going to work the next day, but he's saying, "Daddy, don't go to work." And he said, "I'm happy." And I'm like, "Why are you happy?" And he said, "Because I love you." And I thought to myself in that moment, there's not much more I need in my life than to hear my son say from the bottom of his heart that he loved me, right? So it was a very powerful reminder of what my duties are in life. Now, second story I want to share with you is about death. A few days ago, a client of ours, at the age of 60, passed away in his sleep. It was sudden, unexpected. We had just, cut his hair 2 weeks ago. He was healthy, he was strong, he was vibrant, he was energetic. And then, God called him. And it was very tragic to see to see the funeral and to see the events unfold as they did. And again, it reminded me about duty. And so this is why I want to make this podcast episode today. Duty. What is our duty? Duty is the things that we are meant to do in our life. It is the yardstick by which we know we have done what we were supposed to do by the time we die. So what is our duty? Our duty is to fulfill our obligations to our faith, to our family, to our children. That's our duty. It is to accumulate the best experiences of life that we can have with God, with our family, and with our children. That's our duty. So that's what I want to cover in regards to the definition of our duty in life. So when you measure your success, how do you measure your success? Do you measure your success by how well you've completed your duty, which again involves that relationship that you have with God, family, with your children, and also with fulfilling your work duties and your home duties, all those things. Do you measure yourself by how well you've completed all those duties? Or do you measure yourself by how much money you've made? And here's the problem. When we focus on making money as our primary goal, that whole idea I've always been talking about, autonomy over income, our first million and beyond, that's a means to an end. The end being accumulating the best experiences that we can have with the people that we are obligated to do that with. That's our duty. That's our end goal. But when we focus in on making money, what could happen is we could start to measure ourselves by how much money we make and not by how well we complete our duties. And as a result, something happens. We end up sacrificing our ends to achieve our means. Now, just to reiterate this, we are supposed to make all the money we can make to achieve a specific goal in the end. That is to fulfill our duties. But if we measure our success by how much money we make, what can end up happening is we might sacrifice our end goal, which is that relationship we have with God, with family, and our children. We can end up sacrificing that on the altar of money, where we sacrifice our end to achieve our means. We sacrifice our end to achieve our means. That's backwards. It's not how it's supposed to be. And thus we will end up with a terrible, terrible life in the future. The consequences of this being three things. Number one, when we sacrifice the end to achieve the means, we will end up sacrificing the relationship we have with God, our family, and our children. That's the first problem. The second thing that can happen is we will set an example to our wife, our family, and our children about what kind of people we have to be in life, right? If we sacrifice our ends to achieve our means, which is backwards, we teach the people that are around us that that's how they should live their life. And now we set up a bad example for them to emulate and for them to perpetuate into the future. And the third problem is that when you do finally achieve your end goal of having all the money you want so that you can build up experiences with the people you love, they'll be gone. They'll be gone because you either cut off the relationship or they've changed as people. And that's the great tragedy of mixing up our ends with our means. When we neglect our duties to just focus on success being money, that's the consequence of that mistake. Now, the biggest consequence of all of this, if we look at it, is that in the end of it, we we could actually just end up alone in death. When we go to our grave, there might be no one to mourn us, and that is the worst tragedy. When I've been to a funeral recently where at the funeral hall there were many people that were gathered just for this one person that passed away, but in the adjacent room there was nobody. There was just the funeral director and maybe one witness. And that's a terrible way to go. It is not worth it to accumulate all that wealth and then to die alone because you killed all your relationships to get there. And on the other end of the spectrum, the greatest leaders, CEOs, business people, executives, military leaders, politicians, all of them, the way you know that they are amazing at what they do is that they fulfill all their duties, including work, but especially family. And then once they've done everything, they go home and spend time with their families, right? You have to think of it this way. You have to think of it like being the difference between a warrior and a hedonist. A hedonist is someone who just does whatever they like because they believe that anything that's pleasurable is good, anything that's painful is bad. That's a hedonist. And most of the suffering that we have in the world today is caused by hedonism. That's one thing. But if you think like a warrior is someone who sacrifices their current pleasure for their future pleasure. They embraced current pain for future pleasure. Pleasure not for themselves, but for their families. They have a reason that they fight for. And especially in the military, the best warriors are not the ones that join just to go and engage in warfare. They are there to actually achieve some kind of end purpose, which is valuable to the country and valuable to their home, right? They're not just going out there to fight for the sake of fighting. They're fighting for the sake of their families. There's another rooted cause as to why they're moving. And we need to be like that. We need to be warriors, not hedonists. Now, this is what I wanted to cover in regards to duty. If you believe that what I've told you is going to be impactful to your life, and I really hope you do, please give a thumbs up and rate this on if you're listening on a podcast of some kind. But the biggest thing I want you to know is I just hope that this will change your perspective on money being a measurement of success. The reason I mention this is because I'm Indian, and in our family, money is the measurement of success. But we often ask, what is the person's job when we introduce someone? And the reason is because we just want to know how much money they make. Because money is how we evaluate the worth of a person in our culture. It's terrible, but it's common, not only in India, but in most of the Asian countries where achieving wealth is actually a sign of social status for the whole family. But actually, in fact, the sign of a successful person is the person who has accumulated the most experiences with their God, with their family, and with their children. That's a successful person, and that's how you should measure yourself. All right, so let's just review everything. I told you a little story about life, about my son. I told you a story about death, about a client of ours. I told you then what your duty was and what our duty is, which is to build up the best experiences that we can with the people that we're obligated to do that with. I mentioned that we should measure our success by how well we completed our duties and not by how much money we make. And that if we measure ourselves by how much money we make, we end up sacrificing our duties on the altar of success, thereby leading to 3 consequences. Number 1, we cut off our relationship with our loved ones. Number 2, we set up a bad example for how people should live. Number 3, when we do finally achieve all that money that we always wanted to have, we have no one to share it with, which can lead to us alone on our deathbed, which is a terrible tragedy. The best leaders always fulfill their duties and obligations and then spend time with their families. The world is suffering today because of hedonism. But if we live like warriors, people who actually fight for a certain end goal, that's when the world becomes a better place. All right. So if you enjoyed this video, consider joining the Mavericks. It's mavericks.goldwinandsons.com. Remember, when we're trying to climb to the first million and beyond, when we're trying to have autonomy over our income, it's the one who stays in the game the longest that gets the breakthrough. You might as well not do that by yourself. We're all here to do that together. And it's easier when there's more of us. So you can join us, mavericks.goldwinandsons.com. I'll see you there. Take care.